I think there's a number of reasons that Dickens' stories lend themselves so well to cinema. As we've often said, his stories were always adapted for the theatre. He thought of himself not just as a novelist, but he thought of himself as a dramatic novelist. The way in which he wrote, the way in which he created character, he acted out the characters and acted out their voices before he wrote them down. They were translated all the time into dramas. The way in which he wrote dialogue is very cinematic. It's very highly polished and honed and sharp. Also, description and the way in which he uses description and creates these extraordinarily word play and word pictures. And I think Michael should comment on this as a script writer about how he preempts, in a way, cinematic language.
Yes, and I think the first thing is that people have said in our day that more people know Dickens through cinema and particularly
Absolutely.
Television than they do through his own books.
That's right.
But the fact is that was probably true in his day as well, not just through these theatrical adaptations that we've talked about, but Magic Lantern shows, and of course Dickens's own reading tours, where he adapted his own works for public performance. And so in a way the characters come to you before you even start. But what's so fantastic about him as a writer, and I think he's entirely unique amongst his contemporaries, is that when you're reading Dickens, you are seeing the world that he's creating. And so for a screenwriter, for a director, there's a way in which what you have to do is to realize those images that he makes in your mind while you're reading them.
And I think that you've commented on this before, but other writers and directors have said that you can lift bodily almost chunks of Dickens, and it looks like screenplay dialogue. It looks like storyboard. That you can take these extraordinary descriptions and put them up there on screen, and they're a gift for production designers, cinematographers, and film directors, because of that, I think, completely unique way he wrote. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, is that his contemporaries didn't write in the same way. His predecessors didn't write in the same way, and arguably you didn't have novelists that wrote in the same way until cinema actually came about, and they were directly influenced by it. Dickens prefigures, he preempts cinema with the way he wrote.
The cultural world that Cavalcanti brought into British cinema, first within the documentary movement in the 30s and then in his work at Ealing, can't be underestimated, can it? You know, there's nothing insular whatsoever about his vision and about his influences, and the way that he touched all those other filmmakers, and the way that he was aware of all those different, both documentary and fictional dramatic styles, really is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, it is, and I think you've said it, he had a generosity of spirit, and he was an inclusive filmmaker. He was not someone who was authoritarian. He was expansive, and in a way that's why, Nicholas Nickleby was almost perfectly matched. This big picaresque world of this novel is something that he could relate to, and he could grasp and grapple with, and I think that's why he was the perfect choice to make it. And in a way, I'm just sad that he didn't make more British films and more films at Ealing.
The centre of the film is the performance by Cedric Hardwicke, isn't it? It's a really chilling performance. This is a man, a character, who is entirely venal, entirely self-serving, who seems to be motivated only by the desire to destroy other people. He's the dragon that St. George has to conquer.
And but the performances uniformly are very good. I mean, Derek Bond is terrific as the upright, sort of noble, honourable Nicholas Nickleby. He's excellent. You can't dislike Bernard Miles, you know, coming off the back of Great Expectations, playing Joe Gargery. He then follows it up with this wonderful rendering of Newman Noggs, which is absolutely authentic and believable, and has a real steel to it. It's a very impressive performance, you know, playing off the cold, hard, sort of granite-like, you know, evil of Cedric Hardwicke. He's fantastic, Noggs. Bernard Miles playing Noggs, but also I have to say I've got an extraordinary soft spot for Stanley Holloway. You know, how can you ever not dislike Stanley Holloway? He comes in and radiates light.
Yes, it really brings in at that point in the film. It really, you know, you really then see that there's some parts of this world that aren't gloomy, that aren't driven by money, that aren't driven by venality. That there's a little place in the world where perhaps salvation might reside.
And he just sweeps in a sense, steals all the scenes, and then goes out again. He's just fantastic. This film has been very unfairly neglected. It's very difficult when you have two masterpieces that David Lean made in 1946 and 1948, which have been revered through cinematic history, and because Nicholas Nickleby is in the middle, because it's not as immediate, as accessible, frankly, as in a way easy, although that's nothing pejorative about the novels, as Expectations and Twist, because it is this rambling story where the central character isn't quite as complex or dramatic or interesting as those books, and where it doesn't have the same narrative urge and energy and vivacity of Oliver Twist and Great Expectations. It's been easy for people to dismiss. It's also that notion of Ealing. It's like, oh well, Ealing makes comedies. They don't make dark historical novels. And I think the combination of for want of a better phrase, the Ealing brand stamped on it, the fact that Cavalcanti is sort of difficult to grasp. Is he as important as David Lean? No, he's Brazilian and he only made a few films in the UK. And the fact that the novel's long and complex and difficult to get a handle on. I think for me, there are at least some of the reasons why it's been easy to say, oh yeah, it's okay, but it's not as good as those films. And actually, the more you look at it, the more you realise what a real amazing triumph it was. I think that the film stands up remarkably well, and actually 65 years later you can probably get a better perspective on its quality, its achievements, the strengths of its script writing, its performances, and its direction. I mean, for me, I think I'm realising through re-looking at this is how important a figure Cavalcanti is, and how we need to recognise that more. And so I think that it stands up remarkably well, and it shouldn't be damned with faint praise.